The webinar is now live. That is exciting. What is up? Let me see some activity in the chat to confirm that we are in fact live. Where is everyone? Hello all. Gaetano, first one to chime in. No surprise there. Thank you for your support. Anyone else? Heck yeah. Jennifer, thank you. Cool. Bryce. Okay, so we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy Earth Day. Welcome to CannaGather. As Jim mentioned, it's building sustainable cannabis companies in honor of Earth Day. And this is that time of the month where I wear pants. And many of you may be wearing pants as well. So even though we're not in the same place, we are kindred spirits in that regard. Here to chat about the intersection of sustainability and cannabis, given that today is Earth Day. And obviously, it's not April without 420, the infamous cannabis Christmas, if you will, coined by CannaGather, or was made known, that moniker of 420 made known by CannaGather Steve Bloom, journalist, from apparently some kids over in California high school. And I hope you all had a very enjoyable cannabis Christmas, enjoyable 420. Hi, Joan. Thanks for joining us. Obviously, some more prominent news. The murderer of George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, will be incarcerated, hopefully permanently, for his actions and misdeeds. So rest in peace, George Floyd. Obviously not justice, because he's not still here with us, and can't be here with his family and his daughter. But at least the justice system provided the correct conviction in that case. Likewise, in terms of some good news coming out of Congress, you don't necessarily hear that too often, but safe banking bill passed yet again. So thanks to former CannaGather speaker, Representative Ed Perlmutter, coming out of Colorado. He's the lead sponsor on that bill. And he's been championing that bill for about 8 years, I want to say, maybe a little bit more. But he's been going through the trials and tribulations with that. And so hopefully we get a little bit more traction with the Democratic Senate. As I may have said last time, I think that it's still an uphill battle. Obviously, the president isn't necessarily helping us too much, but hopefully Senator Schumer, who's come out in strong support of the issue over the past 2 or 3 years, will help in that fight. So make sure to reach out to your senators and tell them that the cannabis industry is in need of banking, and it's not just something that goes to some of the larger companies. It's the social equity applicants need banking support as well, to really level that playing field there. Wherein many of the companies that are able to access banking, even though they're cannabis companies, aren't necessarily those social equity companies. So it actually exacerbates the discrepancy between those. And the Safe Banking Act does a little bit to mitigate that. Obviously, things like more go even further, and we're excited about and passionate about that as well. But safe banking is something that should, I hope, be a no-brainer. I would hope. I want to give a quick shout out to Asha Apothecary. It's a purpose-centered hemp and wellness brand. They're a member of 1% for the Planet. So obviously dovetailing nicely with what we're doing here on Earth Day and about the intersection of cannabis and sustainability. And likewise, I want to give a shout out to True Liberty Bags. So they're actually a family-based business, and they're also a 1% for the Planet company. So their focus is around making sure that everyone gets a strong and safe product of the highest quality. So I want to give a shout out, as I said, Asha Apothecary and True Liberty Bags are 2 sponsors for the night. Want to thank Jim Baudino and Evan Eneman for putting together an amazing lineup, to all of our speakers for coming out, and obviously to all of you for tuning in. You may still be coming back to reality with your 420 festivities, but sustainability is a super important topic, especially in the context of cannabis, where you have a lot of single-use items. So very excited to have you all join us for this topic, and then make sure to tune in May 19th. We're going to be getting back to our New York City roots and speaking with some of the mayoral and district attorney candidates, many of whom have already spent a lot of time discussing and interfacing with the issue of cannabis and social equity. So that should be a good one, May 19th at 7 p.m. So I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Evan, who's going to take things from here, and I'll join you guys in the chat. And thank you all again for tuning in.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. Warm welcome to everyone joining from all over the U.S. I'm sure we have hopefully all 50 states covered, and some other territories if we can. And we will get started with our first panel a little bit early. We will do a polling question if we can, if we're able to pull that up now, which we'll share with you. So how much negative impact do you think cannabis industry is having on the environment? We'll give everyone a chance to answer that as we get started, and then we'll pull up the poll from there. Give everyone a chance to do that. All right. Do we have the poll results? Okay, well, no one got the wrong answer, so that's good. A few sums, a few a lot, and some 911s. Well, we're gonna have some panelists on to help us understand how far to that 911 we are. So maybe let's get everyone started. And the first panel today is on the evolution of sustainability. And we have two great panelists here with us, Dr. Nathan Walworth from Asha Apothecary and Christine De La Rosa from the People's Dispensary, as well as many other initiatives. So why don't we bring both Dr. Nathan and Christine on. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us today. So what I'd like to do to get started is if both of you can just give a brief overview of yourself, the work that you're doing, and your interest and support or dedication to sustainable practices. So maybe Dr. Nathan will go with you first, then Christine will have you provide your background as well.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Evan, and thank you all of the CannaGather for having us. Super excited to be here. So I came to the cannabis industry from the ecosystem, environmental, and climate sciences. I was doing a lot of work and research around the world in understanding how ecosystems are affected by humans. So I was driven to the hemp and cannabis industry just because I think there's so much potential as a model industry that we can create, with really the best stewards. And then the culture around cannabis, I think, is just very amenable. Us, having a very strong connection to the plant. So I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Asha Apothecary, and we're laser focused on using Asha as that vehicle for sustainable and regenerative practices in the hemp and cannabis industry. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but that's me.
Great, thank you. Christine?
Sure. Hello, my name is Christine De La Rosa. I am the CEO of the People's Dispensary and the national founder. I come to sustainability through our retail stores. I feel like sustainability is definitely something that's super important, but not only for all of the earth things that it's doing, all the sustainability goals that we have, from the UN sustainability goals to the cannabis industry goals, but also from a racial perspective, because when we are not practicing sustainability, the communities that get hurt first are usually BIPOC communities. And so we have a very specific interest in that, being that we are a BIPOC-led company, to make sure that at least what we're doing is as sustainable as possible.
We will definitely come back to that topic for sure. It's a very significant one as part of this conversation. So thank you for that background. Nathan, we'll come to you for a first question if you're back on. I don't know if we lost your camera there. So with the work that you do at Asha and just in general with your research and teaching, you focus a lot of your time on regeneration and sustainability in wellness and agriculture. Can you help to define in a layperson's term what that means, regeneration, and how important the cannabis plant is to regeneration?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm adjunct faculty at Cal Poly Pomona in the Regenerative Studies Institute, and sort of teach how to apply regeneration, not just to kind of things like agriculture, but just regenerative principles across business and economics and things like that. And so just the way I could describe it is, we all live in whole systems, and right now I think we're seeing a little bit of a system breakdown. So just really, we need to understand the problem inside of the whole. And sustainability originally came from this place of just doing less harm, which is a nice first step. But really, we're really seeing that we need to systemically approach how we sort of regenerate the systems that are breaking down. And so, as an example, just in regenerative agriculture, that's regeneration applying a system of techniques that really pay attention to the health of the whole system, which could be soil, biodiversity, and human systems, rather than, let's say, fertilizer is great, but that really only solves, the health of the plant itself, but there are other unintended consequences that could happen. So, stepping forward using regenerative systems in agriculture is going to be a long journey. We're up against a lot of different things. The industrial agriculture is subsidized in different ways, and so there's a lot of systemic things that need to happen. But I do want to point to the importance of regeneration from what Christine said, where really the framework is first looks at human communities and understands the relationships between human communities and the natural system. And it's those relationships that regeneration focuses on. It's not really exactly like one thing here, one thing there. It's how things connect. And so, regeneration is just an offering of a way and principles and architecture to think through. And I just want to call on the fact that regeneration derives from a lot of native and indigenous practices and how they originally built their societies, where they honored the land and the rocks, and everything had energy and everything had purpose. And it's just so important to sort of see through that lens first, and then you can design how you want to have that impact in the world. And so with cannabis, just to answer your final question, cannabis is just so interesting, right? It just has a rich cultural history. It was used for a long time in spirituality and religious studies, and then the war on drugs happened, and then it was used as a rebellion sort of way, a rebellious way to hang out. And there was a lot of damage done along the way, and so there we can tell a really rich story with how we come back and support the communities that were disproportionately affected by that. And then on the other side, cannabis itself, it's a phytoremediator. It sucks in trace metals and things from the soil. So there's a lot of great uses for it, just in other agricultural ways. So it really is this interesting catalyst, if you think of it symbolically, in the broader sense of trying to create an industry that could be a model. It's a gift, and so I think it's just very very momentous that we have the opportunity at this time to push it forward in that way. So honored to sort of share it and kind of be with like-minded people on all of that.
And to your point around the intersection of human communities and other natural environments and species, do you believe that we have enough education and awareness around even those concepts or those frameworks in order to implement them, or do we still have a long way to go to even understand what regenerative means as a system or as a process for whether it be cannabis or anything else?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and big reason why I'm in education, and actually why I went into kind of brand development. There's so many things in cannabis to try and improve and refine, from supply chains to messaging. But a lot of my background in education and storytelling and things like that. And regeneration is, first off, it's 3 syllables, so it's a long word to say in a marketing campaign. But also it really invokes kind of thinking of a lot of different things where as you try and message that in a very crowded space of advertising, it can get lost in if you can't hit the right points in that educational spin. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of information gaps that needs to be closed, and I think we're, if anything, humans are brilliant storytellers, so I have hope in that regard. But I think there's definitely a long road there, but I think regeneration offers a more optimistic lens, or at least a horizon to go to. Sustainability, I think, can be a little bit of it could be heavy, just because there's a lot of negativities in a way that's attached to like how do we be sustainable. So regeneration with indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, that's really where we're trying to shift the focus and have people have that North Star in that way.
That's great. So Christine, you're an advisor to Regenebus. Can you explain more about what they're doing and the recent work that's been done in your involvement with that?
Oh, sure. So Regenebus started a little over a year ago. I met with them in San Francisco, and it was just an idea, and they were asking me to be on their advisory board. But what they've done is they've taken the UN's sustainability goals, and you can go see them at regenebus.com, and really applied how that could possibly work in the cannabis industry. Because what they were seeing, not only here, but globally, was that there wasn't a conversation that was really happening at the time that was far reaching. So they put together an advisory board of a bunch of folks in the industry at all levels, from research to cultivation, to retail, to verticals, and just started asking us a lot of questions about what we were doing in our companies, what we thought we should offer to other companies, how we should start to look at the lens of sustainability when building our companies. And so we've worked a lot with them. They have a member network. We meet once a month. We talk about the different goals. They're going to be doing a big UN event in October. And really, to be honest with you, when I first started in cannabis, I wasn't thinking of sustainability. We had a retail shop, and lots of plastic comes out of retail shops, And it was really helpful to have these two gentlemen, Jeff and Patrick, to really start talking to us. It was just a conversation. And then I started to, and I'm sure the other folks did as well, really started to think about, well, how are we impacting, the footprint from our company? What are we doing to be more sustainable? How are we figuring out how to do, pre-rolls in a different type of packaging? What can our little corner of the world, what can we do? And Regenebus was really a catalyst for a lot of companies, especially for mine, to do that. And along with Cannabis Doing Good, which is a company out of Colorado who does a lot of our implicit bias work, anti-racism work in our own company, they also worked with Sana Packaging. And so when we were looking for packaging, we're putting out an entire brand line called the People's Cannabis, and we have manufacturers in about 6 different states that's going to start rolling this out in Q4. And we started to looking for the packaging because the manufacturers will provide the packaging for you. It's just a little bit extra cost. But we wanted to make sure that we had something sustainable. So we found Sana Packaging through Cannabis Doing Good. And so we're buying our packaging and shipping it to the manufacturer so that we can make sure that our products are being packaged in the correct way. We're a small company, so it's a small thing, but I was talking to Ron yesterday from Sana Packaging, and I was saying, like, it really requires not only that the large MROs like in New York and the large MSOs, across the country, but also that we include the smaller companies, our footprints as well in the sustainability, and to really explain how it might be a little more expensive than buying the plastic tubes that you put your blunt in, but how we're like think about all of those different companies doing that together, then that makes an impact. And requiring that of your manufacturing makes an impact, and requiring that from your cultivators to try to make them sustainable really starts a movement. So it's not just the big guys, but it's everybody along the supply chain that is moving towards the same goal.
And so at the People's Dispensary, I know you mentioning you have your brands and the start there. What are the trends that you're seeing? Because there is a lot of conversation around the exceptional amount of waste in the cannabis industry, driven by overregulation in a lot of ways, which in and of itself is unsustainable in an industry that is still fairly nascent. What are the trends that you're seeing with retailers, and what are the trends that you're seeing with brands that we should all be aware of, or at least consider as we're thinking about building more sustainable practices within our environments?
I can tell you that our consumers, especially on the West Coast, I don't know about the mid states, and we have, but especially on the West Coast, they've always been very attuned to sustainability. So they will spend a little bit extra money if they know that it's biodegradable, if they know that it's been repurposed. They don't have a problem spending 10 extra cents for that. And actually, they'll look for that. They'll look for those brands that have a sustainability story. So we see that a lot with our customers. Even when we're like just selling a pre-roll, we have, pre-rolls from some brands that are still using plastic. We have pre-rolls from other brands that are using paper. We have pre-rolls that are using hemp plastic. And 9 times out of 10, what we're seeing is that if we give them the option, they will, regardless of strain or taste or terpene, they will pick the item that's more sustainable, because they're really thinking about the long-term future. And so what this is as us going into the product market, that's what we were looking at. How do we make sure that our story includes the fact that, yes, we are spending a little bit extra money, but this is, hemp plastic. This is, ocean plastic. It's, how do we do that? And I think it's going to be very important for any brands moving forward. And I think really specifically in the new New York market, it's going to be key to attracting your customers and keeping them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Nathan, I know you mentioned a big part of what you were trying to do with Asha is being at the forefront of all this. What are the trends that you're seeing? It could be cannabis or even outside of cannabis that are helping you to shape what your position is going to be and how you consider whether it's packaging or the process within this confine.
Yeah, definitely, and super happy to hear from Christine just that, observing that that preference. But just again, as a brand that's just coming out and really shaping the messaging and our practices around it, I think what's been super important for us is to just tell our story, like our journey. I think one of the things that happens when you put yourself out there as a sustainable brand is, you have a bit of a magnifying glass on you, and now, everyone expects every part of your process to be completely ethical and totally clean. And, at the end of the day, like Christine says, it eats into your margins for now. It's just what it is. And I think if you don't tell your journey and you don't tell your audience and your community that you're working on it and you're improving, but you understand there are different things that you want to get to, that I think invokes the empathy, versus you just not talking about it and trying to put up a bit of a smoke screen of saying the right thing. So I think that's really important, because it's not like we can really rely on the biggest players with the biggest budgets to do that. So as a small brand, where what's great is, yeah, from market data, we can totally see younger generations especially are really looking for brands to make that core and not necessarily just an afterthought. I think the big thing that we're trying to solve now in a lot of brands is, how do you close the gap between knowing people morally want to do it, and then how does the behavior match that morality? So I'm really happy to hear that Christine is seeing that. So what's cool is the sentiments there, and cannabis as a culture, we're I think we're ahead in that, because cannabis itself is greatly expands sort of your mind in the moment, makes you present, and that is really important, actually, to just march towards matching your behavior with your sentiment. So those are the variables that we're looking at right now, and just using storytelling as a huge part. I'll end on one of the things that we're really trying to push through is, instead of really just talking logically about sustainability, like how can we use story to get people into that emotional walk with us. So using ritual and magic and just anything that lights you up to move you into a space that that you love is kind of a vehicle that we're trying to use to push sort of sustainable living and mindful choices.
Yeah, and that goes to your earlier point about, as humans, we're fairly good storytellers, some for the benefit of all and some for the benefit of self. But ideally, those stories are what's going to carry the change in behavior that we all need to make individually and collectively. And Asha has a relationship with Kiss the Ground, so you're very familiar with reaching into what might be considered more of a traditional mainstream narrative form of documentary filmmaking, or just filmmaking in general. And then we talked about teach some coursework around this. Can you explain more about the relationships that you have with Kiss the Ground and others, and the role of regenerative farming in the cannabis industry and what impact that could make?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, what's so important for us is really growing our community and just our partners with other like-minded companies. I think going at this alone is where the road gets really really steep and really tough. And so it's been huge for us to not only partner with companies, but also organizations like Kiss the Ground. And Kiss the Ground, I think, is a really interesting organization. They're really laser focused on storytelling for regeneration. But the specific program that we partner with them on is there's something called their Farmland program, where a portion of our proceeds goes towards funding that, where they transition farmers from their traditional, or the practices that they have, to regenerative farming techniques. And really, that's kind of what where we were talking about earlier, where education is so important. We know farmers do would like to steward the land this way, but they themselves weren't necessarily had the proper education to understand sort of those techniques. And so today we're running an Earth Day special where we do $4.22 for the program for every purchase. So things like that are important. But what we also do is take in Kiss the Ground soil curriculum, and we teach it in our classes in Cal Poly Pomona, because the younger generations really want this, and they also just they need a pillar, they need an anchor and a guide, because there's so much to consider. So education for us is huge, and then obviously supporting the farmers who we want to see and survive and thrive. And then regenerative agriculture itself, it's small farmers right now, and the movement is growing. And Kiss the Ground had a film that did really well this past year, and really spreading that traditional ecological knowledge. And so regenerative agriculture really focuses on increasing that health of the system and making sure we don't have runoff and all those things. But I think the big thing that we'll have to do together as a community is really work on, how we can get those policy changes as well to help that farming system. And, a lot of tax subsidies go to other types of farming. And, to get this at systemic scale, it's definitely going to need a lot of us, and not just farmers, but just everyone working on the policy side, the demand side, and obviously the supply side. So, yeah, it's a journey, but, it's fun to be with community doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, all that you share. I mean, there's almost an economic disincentive to do the right thing by the land and the community and the humans that inhabit all of this, because the cost of products that are more damaging is far lower. And I know there was a question to the panel around that, which goes back to your point, Christine, earlier about seeing some of those trends where consumers are willing to pay slightly more for something that they perceive is more sustainable or better for our community at large. How are you seeing, and you do a lot of work with equity businesses. We talked about this earlier. You mentioned that with social equity license holders, and sustainability is one of these things where it is challenging if you don't have the resources to support that wholeheartedly. How does that factor into the work that you do with social equity license holders, and what can an applicant or someone looking to get into the space who wants to try and be as practical as they can be in starting their business, but also really employ some of these practices that can provide some better sustainable outcomes for their community?
Well, I think that there's one of the things I think when I'm talking to social equity applicants and we're talking about their facility design, we're talking about their, architectural drawings, we're talking about the products they're going to carry or the products they're going to create. I really talk with them about how it's so important to pay a little more now to pay a little bit less later. There's an idea that we have to all agree to be sustainable. We're either going to be sustainable now or we're going to be unsustainable later. So literally, we pay for it now or we pay for it later. That's what I kind of tell folks. And especially with social equity applicants who have limited resources, this is a differentiator between you and, let's say, a large MSO. If a large MSO that has 74 stores and is not doing anything around sustainability, and you have 2 stores or 1 store, and one of the pillars, one of your ethos is that we try to purchase from Black and brown cultivators and manufacturers, B, try to make sure that our pipeline, our supply chain is as sustainable as their funding will allow. That's a story. Just what Nathan is saying, that's a story. So you're a story where you're like, well, this is a small company in Arizona that's using all sustainable packaging. Nobody's using all sustainable packaging, but that's my dream. And there's this huge MSO who has the funds and the means to have sustainable packaging, but because they're trying to undercut everybody around them, they're not using sustainable packaging. That's a really great story that will get you about, I would say, 30% of your customers just by having that story. So it ends up being actually a more positive thing, even though it might hurt a little bit in the beginning to be like, oh, I'm paying a little bit extra, but you'll get more from the consumer. And that's one of the things that I think is super important, is that we have to explain to our consumer that they have to demand this type of sustainability. The more the consumer demands it, the more the industry will go to meet them. And so making sure our consumers understand that they have power in their buying, and making sure that the social equity applicants and now owners and operators understand that that is a differentiator about how one person goes to your company, to your retail shop, or goes to another retail shop. Or how I'm, as a retailer, I'm going to look for you as a manufacturer that is being as sustainable as possible before I'll go to a larger manufacturer that doesn't give a damn. And I'm not saying that there are manufacturers that don't give a damn, but I'm just saying, like, that's what we're starting to look for. And it requires us to really think about it in terms of what is our power, not in let's just, accept whatever they give us.
So it's a question for both of you, because it's really interesting to me when I hear of brands or individuals that are stating their purpose, and sustainability is one of the core pillars around that. And it's generally in a lot of ways, people think it has to be an all or nothing. There is an incremental steps that we can take as business operators or community members to make a better place for us. It's always, well, if you're not fully, using anything that's carbon neutral, or then you're just not sustainable anyway, so don't bother with anything. What do you both think about the perspective of, where possible, incrementally improving upon your practices and things that could be more sustainable? And maybe Nathan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, no, it's a good point of, really kind of bringing up, like, how do you take in the criticisms are coming once you say you're trying to do something beyond your bottom line. And then also, what's I think exciting about now is people are stating that they do want to move in that direction, but that in the immediate, it could look like they're actually people that are just more want the most bang for their buck in terms of efficacy of a beautiful flower. It's super high, really high potent oil or something. And so I think to Christine's point, people that are building brands and people that are building stories, and people really see this as a part of their lifestyle and who they are, really have the grit to go and play that long game, and know that just for some time it's going to be a rocky road. And as you receive those criticisms, again, I think transparency is just huge. Like you pulling through your own humanity in what you're building, and just saying, like, if you have more support, you will march toward this goal. And we've seen, I think, other companies improve over time in other spaces, and have moved with their community. And I think cannabis is starting from a place of people do want it, ideally, and now it's just kind of about having the rubber meet the road, and that's sort of kind of how we think of it. But there's amazing brands who are super influential out there, and you didn't hear about them for like 8 years, until finally they hit some threshold, and then you heard about them because they got encircled around in the right communities. And I think that's kind of where a lot of these more lifestyle, mission-driven brands are right now. They're going to be in that pocket for some time, just putting in the work, and all of a sudden you'll hear about them, and they've been there for 8 years. They just didn't switch now. That's what they started with. So that's what our hope.
That's a great point. Christine, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that a lot of times the data that we're seeing around cost and stuff is really taken from a lens of mainstream, and not from the lens of people who are BIPOC, women, from the legacy market, and they're not taken into account as much. And so we see these overarching themes like, nobody will buy it because it's not cheap enough. Nobody will do this, nobody will do that. And the people that really suffer the most are the peoples in these communities. And I can tell you, as coming from those communities, they do care about that. They're not the ones that need 5-cent blunts. Do you know what I mean? They do care about that because it affects their community 10 times more than other communities, right? East Oakland is more affected than Piedmont when it comes to having waste and having, really bad water. It's always those BIPOC-centered communities that pay the largest price. And they know that. They know that more than ever, from the food deserts to the inability to bank within 5 miles of your house. Like, we know all of this. So we're not really sitting here. I mean, I'm not going to say the general we, I'm just going to talk about myself and the people that I know in my community. We are not part of that larger data set. And we are the people that will change that data set, because we have, it's beyond just cannabis, right? It's like not being able to buy cannabis in your area because you're mostly a Black community and they're not zoning for that, or you don't have access to food. So we have a lot of different metrics that I think mainstream metrics doesn't acknowledge yet. I think soon we're going to see a lot more acknowledgement in those metrics because they are very important. And I think what we're seeing right now is people are hoarding their capital because they don't make a lot of profit because of the 280E and the federal, being federally illegal. But I think, my hope, Nathan could also be hoping with me, that once we are descheduled and we don't have that 280E, that we're going to see the J curve that all the tech investors thought they were going to have 3 years ago and didn't materialize because we're a commodity and not a software. I think we're going to see that J curve, and then there will be extra money to really think about sustainability, but they should be doing that now. And I'm sure they are. I'm not saying they aren't, but they should be getting ready to be able to transition all of their products into this more sustainable way. And like you said, it can be incremental. It can be super small right now because you may not have the funds or you haven't set aside the capital. But these SPACs are raising $500 million at one time. They can figure out a way to make this part of their organization sustainable.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of interesting points there. So one thing that we've mentioned now throughout is the power of storytelling and our collective voice and our collective power. Recently, and unfortunately, it's only recently, we've seen a lot more conversation around supporting women and BIPOC businesses. And there's really an effort to share that in a way that has never been shared before. And it's sort of highlighting the need to support certain communities that have been by far more adversely affected by what's been happening with the failed war on drugs and other societal issues that we continue to have and persist. How do we get the word out more? What are the resources that people can find for sustainable practices within cannabis brands? Is there a designation that we currently have that's gaining some momentum, or is there a resource that someone can go and say, well, I only want to buy brands that at least consider whatever it is in their packaging? Are there sources for us right now? Is there a way to get behind a communication strategy or marketing strategy to elevate those brands that are trying to do this? And I don't know if either one of you has a perspective on that.
Well, I can tell you that Cannabis Doing Good is coming out with their own seal for companies that are equity-based, meaning that they care about their communities and are actively putting either volunteer effort, money into the communities that surround them and make them their millions of dollars. But they also have something around SDG and around sustainability that if your brand will go through that process. And once you go through that process, you get a little sticker that you're allowed to put on your product. There's also another company called Voice, VOIZ. They're not cannabis related, but they have literally about 700 graduate students from all over the US going through every company in the US, making sure that they're sustainable and giving them grades. So I think we're going to see a lot of this happening in the next few years, and it's already happening, but I don't know if any, and Nathan might, currently where you can get something on your package that says I'm sustainable or I am attempting to have sustainability goals, but I know that they're coming. They're getting ready to come out from the people that I know.
Yeah, I would echo that with Christine. There's a lot of exciting new developments that are cannabis specific that's sorely needed, and Evan, I think that definitely speaks to your points about what are indicators that that people can see, because a lot of this takes obviously a lot of effort to really do due diligence on companies you're buying from, and that's why third-party certifications are so important. And we see that obviously in just analyzing what's in your cannabis just from a health perspective. So transferring that framework to the sustainability will be super huge for a consumer to just make a very simple choice in that sense. I'd say a couple other ones that are not cannabis specific that are coming online, or that are online. They're I think coming up in more of a becoming more popular. Is there's one called Regenerative Organic Certified. There's a great company called Ondo Wellness that has some of their tinctures that way, or certified by that, and really that's around using regenerative techniques. And then and I think even things like giving back and being being part of a 1% for the planet community at least gives some indication that you've been vetted by another nonprofit organization, and that you're putting your dollars at least where you want to be, and then supported by a community. And then the final thing is maybe just what brands do you love, who are they affiliated with, who do they elevate, just seeing how they behave, just even from a social perspective can be really enlightening. But yeah, we're in the journey of really getting those third parties and that community together, so we can check each other. I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, keeping ourselves honest and accountability within our practices is key. And generally when we say free markets tend to control themselves, we know very well they don't. And it's good to have those third party sources that can help validate, so long as those third parties are honest and ethical in their practices too, which is always a question. Well, so, we've covered a lot of topics here so far, and I just want to make sure we're covering anything else you think would be important to share with our CannaGather community. Obviously, we're coming everywhere from California up through the Northeast and New York, and so there's differences in what our panelists will be curious about or can even effectuate in their own businesses. But any last thoughts from each of you with what companies, brands, individuals should consider about where the evolution of sustainability is and what they can do to support?
Christina, you want to go?
Nathan, you can
Sure.
go.
Okay. I would say that if you're new to the space or planning to operate, if you're not a current operator, you have a really great window of opportunity, so that if you're planning to go into the new markets like New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Georgia, you have New Mexico, just new, Arizona, just new. You're planning to enter those markets, you have a moment where you get to start from scratch, kind of like a lot of the current, including my company, have been around for a while. So we're having to retrofit. You have the opportunity to start from the beginning. And you have that opportunity from the moment you hire your first facilities design consultant. I don't care where on the supply chain you are, but when you hire your facility design consultant that's going to help you and the architect figure out how you're going to lay out your space, let them know that one of the top 3 things that's important to you is that you create as much sustainability in your facilities to start with. And then every time you go to a new group, maybe whether it's a manufacturer because you're starting a brand, make that one of your top 3 goals, and they'll make it one of their top 3 goals. If you can say it that way and say, this is what I'm looking for, they will meet you to where you want to start. And a lot of us don't, not a lot of us, I'll talk just about myself. I've had to go back and retrofit my company because I didn't think of it that way when we started back in 2015, but you do. And so that would be my advice to you. Make that one of the top 3 things.
That's a great point.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and just to echo that, if you just step back and kind of see all the signals outside of the cannabis industry in general, and the new administration putting their agendas and investing more in climate in general, broadly we know where we're going, right? And whether you believe you want to sort of lean into sustainability now or wherever, like, the world is going there. It's there's going to be a lot of incentives in a lot of other industries doing it. So if you are there for the long play in general, the sentiment is going to keep growing. And I think with Christine and Evan and a few of us that are in the space, we're not going to put a timeline on when we're going to see some massive crazy shift. We just know it's going to happen, and it's just about your I think dedication or at least grit in the space. It's just a rocky road, but it's a fun road. But the last thing I would just say is try and not think about sustainability as one dimensional. Always just remember to take into account people and how there's been disproportionate types of effects for a lot of minorities and different communities that once used the plant in a more spiritual way, and then were kind of ostracized from society and certain parts. So that is sustainability as well. The systemic issues cause a lot of pollution that we think of when we just think of sustainability in one dimension. So that's what I would say, is just remember that it's human and natural systems for us to improve.
Great. Well, I appreciate both of your time this afternoon. You've shared a lot of really insightful perspectives with the larger CannaGather audience, and I'm sure there'll be more questions for you either in the chat or after. So thank you again. Some really great insight, and I appreciate that. And we'll get ready for the next panel in just a moment. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And while we get ready for the next panel, we are going to post up another polling question for everyone. So thank you to Nathan and Christine for their thoughts, and we'll pop up a polling question as our next panelists get set. And that should show up on your screen. Do you consider a company's sustainability practices when purchasing cannabis products? And that is an excellent question, and one that Christine gave us some perspective on. let's see how the results are coming in, and hopefully our other panelists are getting ready to join. Great. All right. So we got 36% that say yes and 42% that say I will now. So that's a really nice, overwhelming majority of our CannaGatherers who do feel very strongly about sustainability and making sure that we consider that in our purchasing decisions, which is the power of our dollar. And it is certainly one that we should flex. Well, great. Thank you for those responses. And I will ask our next group of panelists to join for building sustainable cannabis brands. We have Jessica Assaf from Prima, Seibo Shen from Hanu Labs, BRNR Lab, and Vape Exhale, and Ron Basak-Smith from Sana. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Welcome. And what I would like to do is give you all a few moments like we did before to introduce yourselves. What is the work that you're doing, and what are your interests in sustainability? So let's start with Jessica. You can introduce yourself and where you're at in sustainability.
Yes. Hi, so happy to be here. I'm Jessica Assaf. I'm one of the founders of Prima. We are a purpose-driven brand, a B Corp based in Santa Monica, making supplements, skincare, and therapeutic body care with hemp-based CBD and other functional botanicals. I've been an activist since I was 15, advocating for safer products in the beauty and personal care products industry. And after I got my MBA at Harvard, I really wanted to focus my expertise on the emerging cannabis industry because I'm just a daily user and lover of the plant in all ways. And it's been an amazing journey. I teamed up with Christopher Gavigan, who built The Honest Company, to build Prima, and sustainability is in our DNA. We're really trying to create industry-defining standards for sustainability. So really happy to be here to talk about the work we've done.
Great. Thank you very much, Jessica. Seibo.
Hello, hello, Jessica. Awesome intro, awesome shirt. I love it. I'm actually like super nervous now after you just went, but I am the co-founder of Vape Exhale and Hanu Labs. I helped launch BRNR Labs. I am currently working on a sustainable hemp plastics initiative with Kind Sciences. And well, why am I into this? Well, I like to think I'm a good person, and I just want other people to have better lives too. And obviously, seeing all the single-use plastics, things of that nature, I realize, man, this is not a sustainable way. You know, I have children, many of us have children. I'd like to think even if I didn't have children, I would be really pushing for this cause. So whatever I could do to help in this industry or to help anyone, I like to do those types of things. And this is the area where I felt like I could have the biggest impact, which is helping out in the sustainable hemp plastic industry. So that's me. Thank you so much, Evan.
Great. Thank you, Seibo. And Ron.
Yeah, hi. How's it going, everyone? Nice to be here with you, Seibo and Jessica. Evan, thanks for moderating. So my name's Ron. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sana Packaging. We are working on finding solutions and pathways to reduce the amount of single-use packaging waste within the cannabis industry. I came to starting Sana Packaging really as a disgruntled consumer. I'd been living in Colorado since legalization, a little bit before that, and just saw the amount of single-use packaging that I was creating, and just as a new industry that I knew was going to start taking off without a game plan really around single-use packaging, it was scary. And so that's what our company and myself and we all work on to try to figure out how we can move this conversation along and help brands and companies and people who are putting product out in the industry figure out ways to do it in a more responsible way.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. Going to be a really interesting conversation with the perspectives and depth of experience that you all have. So maybe we'll kick it off with the areas that you feel have the greatest impact on the cannabis industry, on the environment. Jessica, why don't we start with you, because you've seen this now from traditional industries, looking at it from the cannabis space. Where is the industry creating the greatest negative impact, let's say?
I think that, we should think about sustainability holistically, because what's best for our health is also best for the environment. With hemp in particular, as a plant, it pulls up the constituents of the soil it's grown in. So it's really important to think about soil health and seed health. And, it starts there. And a huge risk that we've seen in other industries is if you end up with dirty hemp, dirty soil, you can get heavy metals in products. And the last thing we want to do as an industry is make anyone sick. I think we're so fortunate, and maybe the FDA hasn't prioritized CBD because no one's gotten hurt, because we've been able to create products that are generally pure, but it's really important to understand your source and then think about really every aspect, every step of the supply chain, from your packaging, which I know we can touch on. We've got some experts here, but also the other ingredients you use in your products. Again, it's about consumer health too. And then for Prima, we decided to follow other purpose-driven brands and become a B Corp, which starts with the way you set up your entity as a public benefit corporation. And then you basically build infrastructure that supports B Corp's assessment tool, where they look at every aspect of your business and how it impacts sustainability. But it's also really important to think about carbon neutrality, being plastic neutral, which is another certification. It really shouldn't be on the shoulders of a brand to know exactly how to build for sustainability. That's why we bring in these third-party experts and certifications and use their assessment tools. But I think there's so many great ones we can, leverage from the natural products industry, which we've done, which has been great.
Great, thank you. Ron or Seibo, I know you guys both come from, products and packaging and a few other things with single use. Where do you guys feel is the greatest negative impact that the cannabis industry has had overall so far?
Yeah, so I mean, my area of focus is in packaging. I mean, I think as a whole, everyone here knows that the cannabis industry from seed to sale basically has a ton of environmental impacts like any other product being put out. But there's obviously some specific impacts that we're concerned about with the cannabis industry. For me, I'll talk about what I'm knowledgeable in, and that is packaging. And so I think the big thing with packaging right now is really understanding how packaging works and how it interacts with our environment. And so one of the things that I've been really trying to communicate with the folks that we work with is the idea of upstream versus downstream waste. So to make packaging, we have all the inputs that go into it, and then so that's considered the upstream side of things. And then downstream is what happens once it's in the consumer's hands. And then, it's either going to go to landfill, it'll be recycled, potentially composted, all the various waste streams that we have. And, with packaging, everyone's always like, hey, what should we do with packaging? What is the most sustainable option? And I really don't think there is a single answer right now as far as this is the right path. I think there's multiple right paths that are helping move either the systematic problems that exist or the economic problems that exist with packaging. And so I'm really focusing on, from the upstream, the inputs that go into packaging. I think the big thing when we think of any product, everyone's always like, oh, packaging, it needs to be cheaper. And that's something that I really don't want to advocate for, because packaging is something that largely has not included a lot of the negative externalities that we're here talking about today. And so that price hasn't incorporated that. And I think if you think of like when you go to buy a pair of shoes or any product, basically, you're paying for the inputs of that product, but also the labor that goes into that product. And so we as a people have decided that, slavery isn't a good thing. We don't want to do that anymore. But when we buy a packaging, we don't really incorporate the negative impacts on Earth. So in essence, Earth is our slave, because we're basically taking products from it, taking resources from it, and putting those resources in the environment, and not calculating the true cost to us as humanity. And so, just want to have the real conversation around what does it mean when we say, something needs to be cheaper, to be more accessible. And I think, obviously, I don't want to advocate for reducing accessibility of a product to various people, but we also need to make sure that the Earth is put first in this conversation, because we all need it pretty desperately.
There is certainly a need to maintain Mother Earth and actually regenerate it in a lot of ways from the damage that's been done.
Yeah.
Seibo, any additional thoughts on your perspective in terms of, any of the more significant impacts that we've had on the environment per se, whether it's plastic, single-use plastic, or other packaging that we use, it could be plastic around vape carts or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's a very salient point. And Jessica and Ron had great points. I don't have too much to add, but the vape carts area, definitely, I have a lot of subject matter expertise in that area. And Gladys is asking, is there any way to recycle vape cartridges? And, the company that I helped co-create AVD, they are one of the fastest growing 510 cartridge companies right now. And, there's a part of me that I was like, man, we really got to figure out what can we do with these cartridges because they are so popular. And, at least right now, there's very few centers where you could take recycling vape or you could take used vape cartridges too. So there's different platforms like Arts for Carts where you can send your cartridges, used cartridges there. They make art out of it, they sell it, and it's kind of like a cool little way to have a stopgap solution. But we need to think bigger than that. Like we need to be able to figure out ways where it's not just like a marketing checkpoint for people to be able to say, yeah, bring it back to the dispensary, or like we're going to recycle this. It's like we really need to believe in this and put a lot more effort into figure these things out. And I have so much respect for Ron for what he's doing on the packaging side. Like I'm much newer to this space than he is, and man, as I learn more and I realize like, wow, this is very significant. And that's why I'm trying to work at the raw materials level. So not just the packaging, but the bases of the Puffco Peaks, or the shredders can all be made from sustainable bioplastics, whether it's hemp or the ocean recycled plastics. Just looking and being more creative and not putting profitability always at the top, because doing that has made it really difficult for many companies to stay afloat in this industry. So I really believe we can get to a place where we could begin to start helping each other, thinking about each other, and really, really improve each other's lives by contributing to each other's causes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think you hear your kids in the background. So we want to be leaving our planet better off for them than we've been inhabiting it with. You guys have all brought up a lot of interesting points, which is this is not an afterthought. This is a forethought. This is something you have to plan into what you're doing. And Jessica, maybe you can talk a little bit because, Prima, you've gone beyond just that you're the whole predicate of your business, and even going for public benefit corp and going for the B Corp status and going for these other third-party certifications. That's almost an impossibility for some people to think about being profitable in doing so, like to think about the hurdles you have to go through in order to create those practices. Can you help maybe explain to our audience what that entails and why it is so important for you guys and Prima and for others to consider that in their business practices and new startups or whatever they may be?
Yes, absolutely. Such a good point and question. We did get venture funding to launch Prima. I think that's important to note that we did have, a $3 million round to work with, but it doesn't necessarily cost more to incorporate as a public benefit corporation. That's just the way you set up your entity. So it was more interesting educating investors for the, institutional investors for the first time. This is why we want to do this. It was a new policy set up by B Corp. In order to be B Corp, you have to be a public benefit corporation. So we knew starting before we really started the company that we wanted to be B Corp, and you need 6 months of business to use their assessment tool. So you kind of have to decide you want to be a purpose-driven brand before you start the entity. Otherwise, it's really actually more costly to pivot over time because you have to essentially reincorporate your company. So I think if you want to be a purpose-driven brand, you have to set up the company as such. And even if you think about the next generation of consumers, Gen Z consumers, they actually expect sustainability as a core aspect of the business. They don't even praise it. They just assume that's it just has to be that way. So it's also important to understand that the market, if you want to be the cool brand, you have to kind of listen to them and set up your company that way. And there's a lot of incredible examples of, you know, brands that have set the tone. And so I think that's what we're trying to do for the CBD industry. We're more like, okay, more brands follow suit. And, you know, these third-party, Detox Project, we certify our products as certified glyphosate residue-free. Glyphosate is a byproduct of Roundup sprayed on US crops. It may even cause gut irritation. A lot of people think they, you know, can't eat gluten, but it may be a glyphosate, reaction. And so we certify our products as certified glyphosate residue-free by the Detox Project. We use Made Safe certification. We're the first CBD brand to be verified by the Environmental Working Group. But all those certifications, they're, you know, not a huge amount of money. So I do feel that they are accessible. You just have to know which ones to trust and, you know, set up your brand for success.
Is there, I mean, to your point that the certifications themselves might not be cost prohibitive, what about the internal resource and compliance costs in order to maintain that status or to ensure that you are actually achieving that status beforehand?
So I think for the hemp and CBD industry and cannabis industry in general, it's so important to have true experts, cannabis experts on your legal team. So we work with Hoban Law Group. They're amazing and they're just experts. So that's just a given being in the industry. But in terms of anything else, I think that we were so fortunate because both of my co-founders built the Honest Company. So they knew what to care about. We're just social entrepreneurs to the core. So I think we're lucky, but I'm sure there are consultants that know how to do it. And it's not rocket science too. The B Corp website's pretty extensive. You just have to, I guess you have to find your expert.
Great. So Ron, maybe you can help because there are a lot of misperceptions around sustainable packaging. And can you help share what those are, maybe demystify them or correct maybe some of those misperceptions as to sustainable packaging issues?
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, misconceptions around packaging. Like I was saying before, there's this upstream and downstream thing to consider when thinking of packaging. And so that makes it really hard to be like, hey, you know, this is the best product. You know, it really depends on what environmental impact you are trying to fix or help or solve or whatever word you want to use there. And so, for example, if CO2 in the environment is the biggest issue, you might choose one type of packaging. If you believe single-use plastic is the biggest issue, you might choose a different type of packaging. If you are, want to see more composting, you might choose a different type of packaging. And so it's really hard for me to say, like, this is the answer to it, and this is the path you should take. And so the misconception there is that as a brand or someone who's choosing packaging, I think we want to go back to that holistic mindset in terms of why we're choosing that packaging and what environmental issues are near and dear to the brand itself, where the brand is located. I think water's an issue in the world right now, right? And so if you're a brand in Colorado or California, your water is a bigger issue than if you're a brand in the East Coast. And so you got to think about that when you're making your decisions around what packaging you're choosing, why you're choosing it. And I think ultimately what we want to get to is a place where you're making a packaging decision for a reason, and that reason's either helping from a resource perspective or from a systems perspective. So, for example, with hemp-based plastic, right? This is something that I believe is in its really early stages. And like all things and technologies in their early stages, there's inefficiencies to them, and there's problems around it. And there's things we have to figure out so that we can say, on every single aspect of sustainability, this is the best option. And right now we're not there. And there's no material that really checks off all of those boxes. But you then ask yourself, are we choosing a path forward that the timeline with sustainability is so important? Are we trying to find a solution for tomorrow, or are we trying to find something that's going to help fix the environmental issues 50 years from now? And when you're thinking about packaging, there's so many different variables in there. And so, just really looking at what system am I affecting? Am I affecting a downstream system like the recycling system? Are we being a support for that by purchasing recycled material? Am I affecting the compost system by potentially putting out more materials that are compostable? So we might see higher rates of adoption of that. So ask yourself that. And then from an environmentalist perspective, the inputs that are going into it, right? Like if I'm using metal, where's that metal coming from? Who, what land is being mined or destroyed to get that? Same with, any type of paperboard products, plastic products. All of these products have their upstream impacts. And so where as a brand do you want to focus that energy? Do you want to say, we're a brand that doesn't cut down any trees ever, right? Like we never harm a single tree in creating our product. Well, then your packaging decision is going to be different than, a different brand that says we want to conserve as much water as possible. So yeah, I mean, it really comes down to there's no right answer, but there's a lot of answers that move us in the right direction. It takes a lot of critical thinking, and it takes asking questions and wanting to do the right thing, and then also taking that cost as your only factor in making this decision and saying, why am I paying more for this, and why does that cost increase supports change?
Really interesting, and a lot, a session in and of itself to talk through each of those and break them down. And
totally
interesting perspective there. I'm going to maybe pivot a little bit for you, Seibo, because you've been building businesses for a long time, been an entrepreneur for a long time. It's core to your DNA, it seems. And we're talking about building sustainable cannabis brands, and for most of us on the panel and probably in this this CannaGather session, is we know that a brand is an extension of ourselves. And you're doing a lot of work now, and you've developed several businesses, and you're focusing on development of self. Where is the intersection of practicing or trying to practice, within the realm of sustainability and building your brands, to the perspective of practicing and building a sustainable self? Where do those two connect in the world of cannabis and building brands?
Oh, wow. Quite a deep question. And, I think it all goes back to your mindset. Like some people have money mindset, some people have sustainability mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset. So, like if I could just rewind and go back to what Jessica was talking about her B Corp, and like, was it more difficult? Like, what's the business model? Like I was an Asian American studies major in college. I never took a business class. So when I started my entrepreneur career, I was just looking at all these other people, all the different models that they used. And I saw specific models that seemed to work. So I was like, okay, let's copy this framework. And in many ways, like the framework was against what my intuition and instinct was telling me. But I said, okay, hey, there's other people utilizing these frameworks. Let's just copy those. Let's mimic, let's not make the same mistakes. And in many ways, it did help me understand, there are, like, I love what Ron said, there's a lot of right answers that push us in the right direction. So, I would see like, hey, this is a positive way to doing things. And the more I saw it, the more I thought, okay, this is the right way of doing things. But as I became more experienced as an entrepreneur, I realized, oh, copying these frameworks, it's a good place to start, but ultimately it's not the only framework. There's like a million possible solutions, and if you are committed enough, you will come up with a way. Like as Ron was saying, it's not about the cheapest packaging. It's like, if you want to do it right, it requires a certain amount of capital investment. And if there's not many companies that are willing to buy that, then you just got to go find them. You got to go find them. And I know like it's a tougher battle, but I believe it's a much more fulfilling battle, because I used to just live for the quarterly numbers. Like, okay, we hit our quarterly numbers. Awesome. But now when I'm fighting for sustainability, it's like every day, if I could just convince one person, I'm feeling positive. It's not just every few days at the end of the quarter, I feel positive. It's like every day I know that I am mission driven, purpose driven. My vision is clear. I don't have FOMO over NFTs or BitCloud or any of this other stuff that people are talking about. It's like, no, I'm focused on making the world a better place. And I don't care how long it takes me to think of a creative solution. The solution will come if you are committed to that. And that's why like when companies come to me and they want like some sustainability option, and they just say like, this doesn't fit the business model, it's just like, well, I know why it doesn't, because you guys are just thinking in this way where like it's the conventional thinking framework, like you need this amount of margins to survive and this blah, blah, blah. But like, it's like, I always see like companies like Supreme or like any of these that like just virally grow. It's like these people are core to their DNA of like what they believe in, what the values of the company are. And I believe that when you follow that, you know, and you make sustainability like part of your core ethos, you will be able to find the right business model that works. And if you're just doing it because you want to be able to add that to your packaging, then it's not gonna work. You know, Gen Z folks, they're woke, they're smarter than us. They start Googling, they're like, where are they spending their money? You know, so that's why it's like the story that I tell myself is the same story that I tell the world. You know, and that's why I believe the personal brand is so strong. You know, I'm not telling myself a different story than I'm telling you guys, and that's what I believe is important for these companies to start understanding. It's let's be true. Let's not do these things to check a box off the list. Let's do them because it's what is core to what we believe is the right thing to do. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what came out of me.
Yeah, you did perfectly. And it's a great point because you're talking a lot about authenticity of self and authenticity of the purpose that you have behind the brand that you're building. And that is the only way for something to be sustainable. Because very quickly now consumers have access to information or the power of their purse to make those changes and make those changes very quickly. And we're seeing that every single day. We're seeing that more and more. But that core, we talked earlier about in the first panel on storytelling, and that's really what is part of human nature. It always has been. That's really what the brand is. We're storytellers. And I know Jessica, you guys have done an incredible job, and thankfully you've had two co-founders who have led the way in traditional industries doing that well. And to Seibo's point, there wasn't a pathway for that, prior. They had to really create and invent the new model that they move forward with. And it sounds like you're doing the same with Prima. And you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just saying there are models out there that we can start with. So what is it for you guys that was core to that authentic message for yourself and your co-founders? And how do you help others to embody that in building their own brands?
Such a good question. I think back to what's already been said, your product should be an expression of who you are and what you believe. And also I think about them as almost legacy, what you want to leave behind. I only hope that my products are around longer than I am. And I think it's just something that we can, use to evolve and shift business in the right direction for future generations to even do better. So just always thinking through that lens. And, with The Honest Company and with my work in the clean products industry, that was about purity. That was about, creating clean products. But cannabis unlocks the next phase of the wellness industry, in my opinion, which is back to plant medicine. I mean, this is just so much deeper than anything that we've had access to. The fact that for the CBD market, we kind of built itself before the FDA could even take action. And the fact that there's an over-the-counter, there are, direct-to-consumer brands like Prima providing a, broad spectrum hemp extract that's effectively the same active as FDA-approved pharmaceutical drug Epidiolex for rare childhood epilepsy. I've never seen that in history. The fact that we have access to plant medicines and we can use them without going to a doctor. We have supplements for sleep, for anxiety, for focus, and it's such a privilege to be able to create real solutions for some of the biggest problems of today. And I think our job is really to take CBD and take cannabis out of this shadow economy of cannabis and put it into the wellness industry in a meaningful way so that more people have access to it. So it's not seen as, this scary drug. It's just seen as this tool for just collective well-being. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's interesting because we lose sight of that a little bit. And, it is increasingly more important to see the plant medicine movement, which is just a movement to, think about how civilizations lived for forever, using what's been given to us and nurturing that in a way that we've obviously taken a good period of time where we stopped doing that for mostly capitalistic reasons and others. So it's nice to see that we're having a regenerative conversation around what we can do as individuals and as brands to create some sustainable future for ourselves. And it's nice to see that it is younger generations almost reminding older generations of where they were back in the 60s and 70s and what they were going through at the same time, because the parallels, they're unfortunate for many reasons, but they're very consistent. And, you know, I guess our collective hope is that the younger generation now can actually persist with that, given the amount of information that we have access to. I guess, Ron, for you guys and for Sana, what's the ultimate goal? Where do you want to go? How do you want to help build your sustainable practices? And what are you guys going to do to ensure that, whether it's hemp plastics or recycled ocean plastics, that they have an impact in the cannabis space and with a larger number of cannabis operators and brands?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying before. For us as a company, we don't believe that there's, you know, this one material type is going to solve all issues, and we don't want to go out and spread that message. We want to say that it's going to be a collective work of, you know, every packaging company, every cannabis company, large, small, you know, kind of all hands on board here to figure out what they can do to make some incremental change. And for us, it's supporting those systems and being true to the bigger picture with those systems. And so, you know, we know that recycling is a broken system, right? And it's not working, and it's not doing what it needs to do. And largely, beyond the economic factors, it's also that, you know, companies just have to make a commitment to using recycled material to create products. If we don't buy the recycled content that is going into the recycling stream from, you know, consumers, then why are we recycling anymore? We should stop that, you know? And so we should make sure that what we're doing, whether that be creating a reclaimed ocean plastic product or a hemp-based bioplastic, we can explain to the customer, explain to the consumer why making this purchase matters, and how it's helping us move to a different point. You know, I think with plastics, for example, it's like this problem's new. You know, it's like from the 1950s, we've created this issue that we're in right now. And it's not just plastics, it's all types of packaging. But ultimately, you know, in those 50 years, the whole way that products were bought and sold and consumed changed. And now we're going to have to change again, and it's going to have to evolve into something different. And so for us, it's really just about having these conversations, working with the great companies that we do, that they're also willing. You know, people are always like, yeah, the small companies can't do it, the big companies, you know, have to lead the way. We see that all size companies can purchase sustainable packaging. We have, you know, mom and pop to large MSOs and everyone in between. And so for us, it's really about, you know, making sure that we're committed to providing those systematic changes, and the products represent that continually.
Great. Well, I know we're getting close to time here, so what I want to be able to do is give each of you another couple of minutes just to share your last perspectives or thoughts on what either you've been doing to build a sustainable cannabis brand, or what others can do to help build sustainable cannabis brands. So maybe Seibo, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for those that don't know, I recently stepped down as CEO of Hanu Labs and Vape Exhale, and it was specifically so that I could start working more closely with leadership teams. And for me, I think the single biggest thing that you can do is raise your consciousness. And what do I mean by that? It's like when you raise your consciousness, you're not solving specific problems. You just see the world in a more objective, real way. And when you could see the world that way, it's easier to make the right decision. So the best analogy I could give is like, if it takes you an hour to get to work every day, and I take you up the elevator of consciousness to the 100th floor, and you see, whoa, there's a shortcut to get to work in 30 minutes instead. It's like, it doesn't take any willpower to take the shortcut, to take the 30-minute route. So by raising the consciousness and awareness of other leaders, I don't need to teach them what decisions to make. You know, they will just see what reality is and really realize that the decisions that they're currently making today, just for capitalistic gains, are ones that will ultimately be a bad long-term decision. So once you raise the awareness of people, it's like you can't unsee what you just see. And to me, that's the easiest way to start making change.
That's great. And I think that's it's really a mindset that very few of us have in the day-to-day world we live, because it is so noisy. And being able to turn that down even just a little bit provides significant amount of clarity. So I appreciate you sharing that. Ron, last thoughts for you?
Yeah, Seibo, thanks for sharing that. That was awesome. And the thing that comes to mind for me is actually something that was said in the first panel, and that was from Christine, about we're either going to pay for it now or we're going to pay for it down the road. And that's just such an important thing to consider when, trying to raise your consciousness around these things, is like, why is there such a need to be active right now, and to care, and to do something about the way your business is operating, the way you're operating as an individual, because we don't want to have to pay for this down the road. The more that we invest now in these things, and impact is going to pay dividends down the road. It sucks, like sustainability is always this doom and gloom thing, because it is, like ultimately the world is going to end at some point, and that we just don't know when that is, but we want to make it as enjoyable for all things on this planet, not just humans, not just a specific type of human, per specific color of human. We want to make sure everyone is getting the benefits that we, us sitting here, see the beauty in. And so either pay now or pay later, but we're gonna have to get there somehow.
Great, I appreciate that. Jessica, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think similarly, we are not separate from nature. We are part of nature. And so generally speaking, I really believe what's best for nature is also best for human health. Plastics aren't great for the earth. Plasticizers are not great for human health. A lot of the chemicals and industrial compounds we're using are ending up, in the earth. And so I just think it's important to think through that lens too. And then also sustainability. I think a part of it is also thinking about sustainable growth as a company and what we can all do, because we're all part of this larger industry. And the last thing we want to do is undermine the therapeutic potential of the plant. And so I think it's really important for us to kind of hold hands and help each other and learn from each other, and say, we're not going to buy growth, we're going to create quality products. And, we're trying to focus on profitability right now, because I think that's just a really big part of building a business, is making sure you're set up to last. And there's this big extinction event happening with COVID. And I think it's really important to always have that North Star in mind and set up your business in terms of sustainable growth for success as well, so you can stick around. And
well, that is a great point. I appreciate all of your perspectives, and certainly making those considerations today. If you're going to be buying growth at some point, it should be because you understand where that sort of inflection point is, where the growth is sustainable. You can't buy growth forever. Cash is not infinite. We all know that. Neither are our natural resources. So we need to be very thoughtful and mindful in how we build these businesses from the start, and think about a sustainable growth mindset overall. So thank you all for joining. Really appreciate all of what you shared, and I'm sure we'll be having continued dialogue around this topic and many others in the future. So thank you again. And so with that, we're gonna have one more poll question, and we're gonna bring Josh back up to close out the session for us. So thank you all again. Thank you to our panelists, and Josh, here comes the poll question for you, and I'll let you take it from here.
Cool. Thanks, Evan. Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to all of our speakers. Obviously some really experienced folks, and doing really a mission of good. The idea, I think, here is to do good while doing well. So basically, a really multi-bottom line opportunity. One is trying to make money, obviously, but also do it in a way that is good for the environment, and ideally leaves it even better than it would have been without these companies. So I just want to thank all of them for tackling this critical problem that was touched on earlier. That it's very easy to say, oh, it's the responsibility of the larger companies, but there are a lot of companies, small startups and mid-sized companies that are tackling this head on, and it's really, I mean, you heard the word extinction used. It's critical. We're seeing the effects of consumerism and capitalism, and single utility items plague our environment. And I think we're in the sort of third inning or so, fourth inning or so of that. And I think that sort of cycle and cadence is going to accelerate pretty rapidly. So if we don't do something now, if we don't really start incorporating the idea of sustainability into our business models, we're fucked. So thanks for joining. May 19th is the next one. Join us as we learn from the mayoral and district attorney candidates and their views and perspectives on cannabis and social equity. And hopefully we get some good conversations going. And I know that we already have some excellent candidates for both roles. So I look forward to that. And we're going to keep the chat open for a little bit. There's still quite a few of you still hanging out, so you guys can exchange your contact information. You can sign up for the next event. Joy just posted it. Thank you. And yeah, hit us up if you want to get involved in future events. If you want to sponsor, if you know anyone who would make for a good sponsor or a good speaker as well, just josh@CannaGather.com. You know where to find me because I spam you. So hope you enjoyed the emails and thank you again. Happy Earth Day. Bye-bye.